Good evening and welcome to tonight's news bulletin live from this news center of the Sultanate of Oman television. But first, we begin with the headlines. The Ministry of Health reports 20 deaths, 476 new COVID-19 cases during the last 2 days. The campaign to vaccinate students of 12 years old and above against COVID-19 starts in the governorate of the FAR. And the development and expansion works of a fishing port in Masira Island continue. Good evening once again, and thank you for joining us. Those were the headlines, and now the news in detail. The Minister of Health reported 20 deaths, 24 deaths, 100 new. I'll repeat again. The Minister of Health reported 20 deaths, 476 new COVID-19 cases, and 1,015 recoveries during the last 2 days. The Minister also reported that the total number of COVID-19 cases registered in the Sultanate reached 299,418, while the total number of deaths was 3,968. The total recovered cases reached 286,679. The ministry indicated that the total number of inpatients reached 299, of which 129 are in intensive care units. Within the efforts of the Ministry of Health, the campaign to give the first dose of COVID-19 vaccines to the 12 years old and above students category started in the governorate of the FAR. Meanwhile, the efforts continue in various wilayas of the governorate to vaccinate the rest of the age categories. The ministry, in cooperation with the Ministry of Education, prepared a number of vaccination centers in various wilayas of the governorate of the FAR to make the process easier and comfortable for citizens. The national COVID-19 vaccination campaign continues in the governorate of Buremi, targeting male and female students who are 12 years old and above. The campaign also targets people who should take the second dose of vaccines. The vaccination centers have witnessed good turnout, which reflect health awareness among all segments of the society. As per latest studies, the vaccines against COVID-19 have reported their safety and effectiveness. With the increase in number of fishermen and fishing ships in the Wilaya of Masira, the development and expansion work of sea fishing port are continuing with self-efforts from fishermen in Masira Island and support from the private sector. The project is being supervised by the Minister of Agriculture, Fisheries and Water Resources. The project is expected to be completed at the end of this month. The fish production from occupational fishing in the Wilaya amounted to 24,239 tons at a total value of more than 19 million Omani Riyals. The Oman telecommunications company Omantel signed an agreement to support cultural, sports and youth activities that are supervised by the Minister of Culture, Sports and Youth. The agreement comes within the extended partnership between Omantel and the ministry. Both sides seeks to invest in building the capabilities of Omani youth, as well as to enable them to enter the labor market or establish their own projects. Omantel is also considered as the partner of the ministry in the Omani Manuscripts House project and turn it into an electronic platform, in addition to sponsor the national football team in its various Gulf participation, as well as to support various sports federations. The activities of Gulf Youth Initiatives Forum started today through video conferencing. The event is being implemented by the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Youth in cooperation with the Public Authority for Youth in the state of Kuwait. The forum reviews experiences of Gulf Cooperation Council countries in the field of youth initiatives through different training workshops and preparing a guidebook on youth initiatives, which benefited more than 100,000 male and female youths in GCC countries, Jordan and Morocco. You're watching the Sultanate of Oman television, and yet to come in our news bulletin. The United Nations panel on climate change told the world that the global warming was dangerously close to being out of control. Once again, welcome to the news from the Sultanate of Oman television. The world seems to be slowly but surely falling back into an easier path when it comes to travel. Many countries have lately eased their restrictions and opened their borders to more passengers. This report states that.
The world seems to be slowly but surely falling back into an easier path when it comes to travel. Many countries have lately eased their restrictions and opened their borders to more passengers. Fully vaccinated travelers returning to England from France will no longer have to quarantine. Britain has also opened up to 7 more countries. Britain operates a traffic light system for international travel, with low-risk countries rated green for quarantine-free travel, medium-risk countries rated amber, and red countries requiring arrivals to spend 10 days in isolation in a hotel. Austria, Germany, Slovenia, Slovakia, Latvia, Romania, and Norway were added to Britain's green list for low-risk travel on August 8th, meaning the arrivals into England from those places do not have to self-isolate whether they are fully vaccinated or not. Following the same steps of easing travel restrictions, for the first time in 16 months, Canada reopened its border, lifting its COVID-19 travel ban to fully vaccinated U.S. visitors entering for non-essential travel. However, the U.S. maintains border restrictions on both its Canadian and Mexican borders for non-essential travel, and has said it will extend those closures until at least August 21st.
I need a green pass and your ID.
And in Italy, a digital or paper certificate called Green Press has been made mandatory on Friday for an array of leisure activities. This means tourists visiting the country's most famous landmark, the Colosseum, have to show proof of vaccination, a negative coronavirus test, or that they've recently recovered from COVID-19 in order to enter. The number of people visiting the Colosseum has increased recently, thanks to coronavirus restrictions on travel being lifted.
That was a report read by Sausan As-Suleimania. Now we continue with the news. The Taliban seized 3 more provincial capitals in Afghanistan, putting 9 of the nation's 34 in the insurgents' hands amid the U.S. withdrawal from the country. The fall of the capitals of Badakhshan and Baghlan provinces to the northeast and Farah province to the west put increasing pressure on the country's central government to stem the tide of the advance. Gunfire echoed through the street as Taliban fighters carrying M16 rifles and driving Humvees and 4 pickup trucks donated by the Americans rolled through the streets of its eponymous capital. While Kabul itself has not been directly threatened in the advance, the Taliban offensive continues to stretch Afghan security forces, now largely fighting against the insurgents on their own. A European Union senior official already has said at least 65% of Afghanistan is held by the insurgents, with the government continuing to lose ground. However, Afghan President Ashraf Ghani rushed today to the surrounded province of Balkh to seek the support of 2 warlords there to push back against Taliban advance. Democrats pushed a $3.5 trillion framework for bolstering family services, health and environment programs through the Senate early today, advancing President Joe Biden's expansive vision for reshaping federal priorities just hours after handing him a companion triumph on a hefty infrastructure package. Lawmakers approved Democrats' budget resolutions on a party line 50-49 vote, a crucial step for a presidential party set on training the government's fiscal might on assisting families creating jobs and fighting climate change. High taxes on the wealthy and corporations would pay for much of it. Passage came despite an avalanche of Republican amendments intended to make their rivals pay a price in next year's elections for control of Congress. At least 25 soldiers died saving residents from wildfires ravaging mountain, forest and villages east of Algeria's capital. The president announced last night as the civilian toll rose to at least 17. President Abdelmajid Tebboune tweeted that the soldiers were martyrs who saved 100 people from the fires in the two areas of Kabylie, the region that is home to the North African nation's Berber population. 11 other soldiers were burned fighting the fires, 4 of them seriously. The mountainous Kabylie region, 100 kilometers east of Algeria's capital of Algiers, is dotted with difficult-to-access villages and with temperatures rising has had limited water. Some villagers were fleeing while others tried to hold back the flames themselves using buckets, branches and rudimentary tools. Multiple fires were burning through a forest and devouring olive trees, cattle and chickens that provide the livelihoods of families in the Kabylie region. A landslide struck several vehicles traveling on a highway in the hills of northern India today, trapping as many as 50 people. A bus, a truck and a few other vehicles were buried under mud and rocks following the landslide in Himachal Pradesh state's Kinnaur district. District's administrator said up to 50 people were feared trapped and 7 had been rescued and taken to the hospital. Heavy rain has caused several landslides in parts of Himachal Pradesh state over the past few weeks. The region is 600 kilometers north of New Delhi. Experts say the heavy rainfall along India's western coast is in line with how rainfall patterns have changed in the region in past years due to climate change, as the warming Arabian Sea is driving more cyclones and more intense rainfall over short periods of time. Wildfires ravaged many parts of Greece and Turkey on August 9th as the United Nations panel on climate change told the world that global warming was dangerously close to being out of control and that humans were unequivocal to blame.
The reports from the scientists of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change warned that already greenhouse gas levels in the atmosphere are high enough to guarantee climate disruption for decades, if not centuries. In other words, the deadly heat waves, gargantuan hurricanes, and other weather extremes that are already happening will only become more severe.
It is indisputable that human activities are causing climate change and making extreme weather events more frequent and severe. Second, it shows that climate change is affecting every region on our planet. And lastly, it explains that strong, rapid, sustained reductions in carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gas emissions would be required to limit global warming.
Fires that broke out during Greece's worst heat wave in 3 decades last week burned unabated in many parts of the country on Monday. In the last 2 weeks, fires have wrought damage on tens of thousands of hectares of forest in Turkey's Mediterranean and Aegean provinces, killed 8 people and forced thousands of people, including tourists, to flee. Monday alone saw 500,000 acres of forest burning in California, while in Venice, tourists waded through ankle-deep water in Street Marks Square. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres described the report as a code red for humanity.
We are not talking about the fact that 2021 is currently projected to be the year with the second highest annual emission rise ever. That's not something that's, if you read like newspapers today, it seems like people are doing something. Countries are presenting net zero targets like decades into the future, and we are taking action.
In 3 months' time, the UN Climate Conference in Glasgow, Scotland, will try to wring much more ambitious climate action out of the nations of the world and the money to go with it. Drawing on more than 15,000 scientific studies, the IPCC report gives the most comprehensive and detailed picture yet of how climate change is altering the natural world and what could still be ahead.
You know, it's a bit like an alarm clock. You can keep switching the alarm clock off, but eventually, if you don't get out of bed and go to wherever you're meant to be going to, it will be too late. You won't get there in time. And I think that this is what this report really is saying. Listen, the alarm clock has gone off many times. This is probably the last report that will be written before we go through and beyond 1.5 degrees C, unless we act now. And that's quite a stark warning. You know, the wildfires out of control in Greece and Turkey, the heat domes in California and you know, British Columbia in Canada, the wildfires out of control in Siberia, the floods in Germany and in China. You just look anywhere around the world and you see climate catastrophe unfolding. All this report is doing really is putting the science behind this, saying that we are now certain this is human-induced.
The report says, unless immediate, rapid and large-scale action is taken to reduce emissions, the average global temperature is likely to reach or cross the 1.5 degrees Celsius warming threshold within 20 years. The pledges to cut emissions made so far are nowhere near enough to start reducing level of greenhouse gases, mostly carbon dioxide, CO2, from burning fossil fuels accumulated in the atmosphere.
Indeed, global warming is close to out of control. We human, all of us are responsible, and countries need to work on that. This is the Sultanate of Oman television. Before we end tonight's bulletin, here are the main points once again. The Ministry of Health reports 20 deaths, 476 new COVID-19 cases during the last 2 days. The campaign to vaccinate students of 12 years old and above against COVID-19 starts in the governorate of Dhofar. And the development and expansion works of fishing port in Masira Island continue. With that, we come to an end of tonight's news bulletin. Special thanks goes to all frontliners, healthcare workers for their sacrifices and everything they do. Thank you for keeping our community safe and healthy. We as community promise to stick to all preventive measures for the safety of one and all. Good night.